Okay. This is the November 16th meeting of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee. I'll quickly take the roll. Kevin Charette.
Here.
Ben D'Antonio,
Present.
Counselor Kate Cook,
Here.
Peter Somsich. Here. Tom Rooney.
Here.
And I have to regrettably say that Allison Tanner and her husband are moving to Maine, so we are going to miss the wonderful intellect of Allison Tanner and her creativity, since after all, she created our Portsmouth Community Power logo. So we'll look at that and always remember her. We have guests from the Sustainability Committee. Maybe you all would like to just introduce yourselves.
I'm Kate O'May. I am one of the staff liaisons to the planning sustainability committee, but I'm the associate environmental. I am Effie Valley from the sustainability committee.
Bert Cohen from the Sustainability, hi Tom, Chair.
Preston Shaw, the deputy health officer.
Great.
Rick Ware from the Sustainability Committee.
Aubrey, nice to see you. And City Manager Karen Carnot is with us until the planning board starts as Councilor Beth Moreau. Couple of items of business. Did everybody get a chance to read the September minutes? And I'd be looking for a motion.
Can I make a motion to amend those minutes? A minor
Sure.
amendment.
Yeah.
In the paragraph under we remain stewards of PCP, there is 2 bullet points. One of them says help residents reduce their rates. I would just suggest that we say reduce their bills. We don't really pay rates. Rates are set. We pay bills and they're dependent on rates, true, but we cannot have an impact on rates directly.
Okay,
I think people, yeah.
all right. Okay, so a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I make that motion.
Okay,
Second.
all right, all in favor?
I
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that carries. I think I'll go right to the main event since some people have to leave early. Our guest tonight is the new Chief Executive Officer of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, Brian Calnan. And Kevin, maybe you want to give us a short biographical.
Yeah, sure. I know I could rely on Brian as well, but he, after an extensive search earlier in the year, we were thrilled to have Brian come on board with extensive experience in the energy industry, both in Vermont and then with the New Hampshire executive at the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative. Tremendous depth in the supply area, electric supply area, which is hugely important to the co-op. And he's been hit the ground running now several months ago and is building out his team. And we've been absolutely thrilled to have him on board.
Great. Well, welcome, Brian. We thought we'd get a little overview of the coalition and then some question and answer.
I thought maybe I would switch and head over there.
Okay.
So my back isn't to you guys. Good. Does this work for the Zoom? Okay. So hello, everybody, and thanks for being a member. Right? I mean, this is what community power, I love this slide. This is what community power looks like to me. And I think this is probably one of the best examples of it that I've seen. I've been strictly in public power for 20 years. And I don't think I've seen a better example than Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire in a way where creating, like, municipalizing without municipalizing, right? So it's pretty impressive. I've got an agenda that we put together on the next slide. And we don't need to hit all of these, and I think we've got We'll try to keep it to 35 to 40 minutes, I think. You're a member, and we want to make sure that you guys have your questions answered. And if you've got questions as I'm walking through this, just jump out and ask them. But I would like to hear, we just started, right? So it's probably not really fair to ask this, but we want to make sure we're helping you meet your energy goals, right? That's why you joined. And that's something that we want to make sure we continue to hit on continually. I mean, Kevin's making sure we're doing that. Don't worry about that. But, so we started off, thought that it would be what's it been like since we started here. I started at the end of May. And you hear the term of drinking from a fire hose, and that's what it's like, but it really wasn't that bad. Because this is an area that I'm very comfortable in. And I think that's one of the reasons that you guys decided to bring me on, which is great. The part that was extremely fun was setting that first rate when we got here. And now that we've moved past that, we're getting ready to set our next rate. But it's starting to build the team. And one of the best parts of being a manager is finding fantastic people to work with you. And when you find fantastic people, it's amazing what you can do. So trying to find the right people is something that I really look forward to do. And I think we've found some fantastic people to help start us off. But I can tell you, it's not a hard sell. When you want to say, hey, do you want to come work for an organization that's just starting out and helping communities take control of their energy future? You get a lot of people that raise their hand. So we had really an excellent selection of folks to choose from for the positions that we hired for. We weren't completely successful on all of the positions we were looking for. One of them was trying to maybe do too much with one position. So I think we'll break that out into 2 positions and make it so that it's easier to find those folks. But for the other ones, it was amazing the response that we got. So that part's been quite fun. We have a home base now up in Lebanon. I live in Hanover. For those of you that didn't know, which I imagine is everybody, but so Lebanon's quite close for me, which is great. Found a great location. If you're familiar with Lebanon, it's right on the green. So it's a really nice area. And it can fit the amount of folks that we need. And then there's a little bit of an expansion if needed. So that was exciting, trying to find a spot there. And we did keep a location in Concord as well. So there's a lot of work to do down in Concord, and it's awfully handy to be real close to the State House, to either to hold a meeting with somebody or to be able to quickly prepare for a meeting. So we have 2 locations for being a fairly small location or an organization. You might see that as a luxury, but it's definitely handy. On the next slide, I have kind of an introduction on who. Oh, skip that one. Let's go to the next one. There we go. Huh. Look at this. So here's what we have. Here's who we have today. Who here knows Henry Herndon? Right, most of you. So Henry is someone that really helped pull this organization together, did a lot of work with many of you as well that did the same kind of work. But Henry's fantastic, helps explain kind of complicated subject matter and make it understandable for folks. And the biggest thing I think is to not make it scary. You see that in people's eyes when you start talking about, and Ben, you're familiar with this, when you start talking about market structure and how ISO New England works, and then suddenly people either gloss over or they get nervous and they don't ask questions, and that's like the worst. Like, you want people asking questions about it. And I think Henry does a great job of explaining some of these topics to folks. He's very skilled in presenting. And his, obviously his heart is in the movement. So we were lucky that he wanted to come work with us and make it a full-time gig for himself. He's our director of member services. And then we found Dina Dennis as a director of regulatory and legislative affairs. She worked with EPRI and Ceres down in Boston, 15 years of experience. And she has completely hit the ground running. There's a regulatory and legislative kind of update I'll show you later on. So she is basically reading all the time right now, trying to catch up on all the events that are all of the dockets that we're trying to make sure we keep abreast of and actually have input on. What's really helpful, who here knows Clifton Below? Wow, everybody knows Clifton Below as well. So every organization needs a Clifton if you can find one. And we have a Clifton, so we're blessed. I don't think this organization would be here without the beginning of Clifton putting this together.
There's only one in the whole state.
Yes, yeah, but everybody needs one. If you can find one, keep them. But Dina is hopefully gonna give Clifton a little bit of a break that's well deserved and help kind of put everything in more organized manner so that he's not working as much as he was before. So those two are going to be working together very closely. Bobby Joe Michael, Director of Administration. Also lots of experience. Bobby Joe, she's in Loudon. Dina lives in Manchester. Henry's down in Concord. Bobby Joe, she came from us from the education field. So I don't think there's an industry that is more giving than there is in education, right? Everyone is really pushing in education to make things great for the students. Bobby Joe is no exception to that. So we were lucky to find her as well. It was a really big move for her. It was hard to get her to come over because she likes what she's doing. But she's exceptional at helping boards manage themselves more efficiently, which we have a growing membership and a very active board and quite a few committees. So we are looking forward to having those skill sets now on the team. That's the beginning of our team. On the next slide, you're going to see a lot of question marks, but this is where we seem, and Kevin, you haven't seen this yet, but this is where 2024 is where we're headed, is we've got a few more positions and maybe another position or two, but these are the ones that I'm going to be focusing on. This one here, those first two, Director of Projects and Programs and Senior Energy Analyst, and those titles might change a little bit, but you get the idea of what they're for. Director of Projects and Programs, a big part of CPC&H is coming up with innovation, coming up with ways to help flex load for folks, right? If you've got, how can we do demand response better so the right projects get built in the state? How can we get more out of the current infrastructure instead of just building to meet new loads? When we talk about projects, those are kind of the program side of things. And then projects, how can we get more renewable energy built in this state efficiently and cost effectively? Every single member that I've talked to has at least one project in mind already. You know, we reach a lot of communities already. And when you start stacking up the amount of projects that could be there, that could be put together, not all of them will get done, but there's a lot there that you can work with already. And a lot of these towns have already done some of the legwork to get those projects off the ground. So I'm hoping this person is going to be as excited as I am about that subject, because there's already a lot to work with. You don't have to go find it. It's sitting there. Senior Energy Analyst. Everyone needs a spreadsheet jockey these days, so we're looking for one, someone that really knows how to run the numbers, do a pivot table or two. Maybe a little database skills. This is just a lot of data in this industry, and that's not just for electricity, that's for, I think every industry has got a lot of data these days. So that's something that's a position that can really help out. And then on this end, the communications specialist, we have kind of filled that role a little bit. We're working with some great partners. One of them is the Resilient Buildings Group. I'm sure most of you have heard of New Hampshire Saves. It's kind of the efficiency group for the state of New Hampshire. RBG works with New Hampshire Saves, and it's one of the contractors for New Hampshire Saves. And so those guys we've hired one of them, one of their names is Andrew. One of the person's names that works directly with us, his name is Andrew Hatch. Andrew Hatch, kind of like a key accounts type person, but he is going to some interested towns that are wondering about CPC&H and seeing if it might be right for them. Andrew Hatch is going there and not just telling them about CPC&H, but telling them about community power in general. What does community power mean and what can it do for your community? But as our membership is growing, which we could probably go to the next slide. Yeah. As the membership is growing, we're already at 45 members, one county. And in that county, 3 towns have launched, and there's 2 other towns that are getting ready to launch. So we are a member services organization. If you start to get to these types of numbers for members, you need to keep that service level high. And in order to do that, you need to communicate. So that's why that communication specialist was there on that last slide. RBG is helping us out with that. So we've got Andrew Hatch, and we're getting ready to bring on another part-time person that's going to move to full-time in January. Because one of my jobs is to make sure that member services level stays as high as it can. And I don't want to make sure that we have enough resources to do that. So we are really, it says greater than 25%, but technically we're at just about 28%. And we're getting close to 30%. That's a lot of people. And this third bullet here, the rapid growth, it's not so much the rapid growth, it's just the interest level is, it's very empowering to see, because you've got so many communities that are reaching out to ask about community power. So we've got a list probably of about, the last time I checked, it was a little over 80 communities total when you added up the interest level. So that's a lot to work with. You want to make sure that those new communities are also getting services so that they can learn about it. We have a fairly comprehensive website. If you haven't been to it, go look at it. We've got a lot of documents online. We're very transparent. And there's a lot of how-tos and FAQs on there. But that's a lot of meetings like this. So there's a lot of folks that are going out. I think Henry and Andrew are out most nights during the week, going to different communities. We launched in 2023, about 450,000 megawatt hours in 2023. I think that number is a little bit high, actually. But by 2024, really, I think in March of 2024, we have another wave coming in March. We will be the CPC&H, not community power, but CPC&H itself will be the second largest default service provider in the state of New Hampshire. Eversource would be the only largest.
I'm just curious, it seems that Concord is noticeably absent on there as our capital city. What's the status of them? Just out of curiosity.
That's another interested party. We've had some meetings with Concord. Just talked to them yesterday, actually, as well.
Spring of next year, maybe.
who knows? Every community is different. Every community has the same, or doesn't have the same goals. And I want to find another picture on here and I don't have it, so I can't show you, but that's just CPCNH involved communities. But I think we really should be celebrating the success of the spread of community power aggregations in general. So not every community comes to CPCNH. Some use either a broker model or are still thinking about what they're going to do, and they haven't become a member. But those are still successes in the state because those are communities that are coming to taking control of their energy future. And not everybody is gonna want just to go with CPCNH. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do CPCNH. But that's for those communities to make their decision. We can go to the next slide. So I don't like this, but there was a question. There's a lot of numbers on here. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but it was about, well, what's the financial situation look like? And I'll point to, we can look to the great city of Portsmouth, which is on their third one up. This kind of talks about, and this is only through August. This talks about how many sales have occurred for the city of Portsmouth. What was the cost for those sales? And then you have joint reserves and customer savings. So when you combine joint reserves, and I can talk about reserves a little bit in a second here, you combine customer savings, this is the benefit of launching a CPA for the city of Portsmouth. You combine those two numbers together. So customer savings just means the difference between the rate that you would have been paying versus the rate you're now paying. Right, so that's the customer savings piece.
And Brian, I mean, you mentioned, but this is only through August and we went live in June here in Portsmouth. We weren't in the initial wave. So you kind of can almost double those numbers now through November, almost. Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe ratchet them up 75% or so.
yeah,
Those are low.
The rate did change in August.
Correct. Yep.
So there was a little bit of a difference in savings there, but it does tell you how quickly that can get there. Those numbers can get up there. It's not insignificant. It's very meaningful what the community has done for the ratepayers here. So I think you all should give yourselves a round of applause on that. It's pretty impressive. Yeah, it really is. And if that's what makes the job so darn fun, I gotta tell you, is that it's really working. So joint reserves, and you might understand this and know this already, but you can kind of think of that as equity in CPCNH because we're a nonprofit. So anything that we bring in that's over and above what the costs are, go into a bucket called reserves. And then the bucket gets broken out by the amount of sales that you've had on a megawatt hour basis for the most part. I mean, that's an oversimplification of it, but that's the majority. The majority, how the majority of the costs are broken out. Some of them are broken out a little bit differently, but. So what that means is, that if say Portsmouth was to leave CPCNH, but it gives you an idea of the equity that you have in the organization. The amount of accounts are next. These two, I'm not even going to focus on those numbers. Look at the current accounts. That's the one that you should be looking at. 11,002. And this part, this is, I think, very interesting. It's one of the questions you hear about from communities that are thinking of doing this is that, oh, this is an opt-out program. People don't like the idea of an opt-out program. I'm sure you had those same discussions around your table.
Mm-hmm.
This is how many folks have decided to leave once they've come in. These numbers. Opt down or opt out. So come right through. That's how many folks have decided not to stay. You have the other ones which are opt-in. So those folks that were on competitive suppliers. We could talk about net metering too. If those folks really They decided to opt in. They dropped their competitive supplier and they decided to come over to CPC&H. 1% opt up means that they took the basic and they decided that they wanted to get to a higher renewable content product. So they opted to a new one. And we have a question.
How do you get out of the competitive suppliers like, who do you call to change from Direct Energy back to Eversource so that then you can join Community Power?
You could actually opt in. You don't have to go through Eversource. You could opt in straight to us. You go to our website to opt in. But you do want to check with Direct Energy first because sometimes there's a penalty for leaving early. So you want to give a call to Direct Energy. But you don't need to go to Eversource to opt in. You can come straight to your website, really,
Yes.
to opt in.
And
Brian, I got a question
Oh,
for
yeah.
you. Customer savings, I presume, is relative to your relevant default service rate. And then community benefit, what's that?
That's the combination of these two.
Reserve and the rate.
Reserve and
Thank you.
add customer savings.
Thank you.
And if you want to know how many folks are taking which product, this is on this table as well. So 98% of the folks are taking Granite Basic. But look at this. You got almost a percentage that are taking Clean 100. I think that's what you end up seeing with many communities is they go, they're gonna straight to the large one, the full 100%. So this is a work in process, we're moving towards this and I'm trying to find what the right way to present it is. But this is a requirement. We are supposed to give this to the CPAs, all the CPAs, every month. I wish we would have written that to be quarterly, but it isn't. Maybe we can get that changed. But monthly, we're supposed to be pulling something like this together and there'll be a different iteration, I'm sure. But so far, this is supposed to give you a good snapshot.
Aubrey?
So quick question, the joint reserves, then that's the pool of funds that could go to. Say incentivizing energy efficiency programs or actually building a solar array or something like that. That's the pool of money that Community Power is generating to do projects with. Am I understanding that correctly?
Not really. That would be this column, discretionary reserves, for the most part. So discretionary reserves are, if you were to, as Portsmouth Community Power, decide to add a small amount to the rate, you could put that small amount into something called a discretionary reserve fund, and we would account that for you. And then you could build that fund and do a weatherization program, or do an EV charging program, or do a community solar program that you would direct. It's your discretion, I think is why the term is there. This one really is to help us build a balance sheet because we're brand new. And in order to effectively trade with folks, or when I say trade, purchase power from folks, or to help build a renewable facility, you kind of want to be bankable. We're hoping to get our own credit facility in place, which means our own line of credit. You guys are all familiar with that, being from a town or city. It's very important when you want to do things, is to be able to have that kind of funding available should you need it. And that's usually the case, is should you need it. So what we've got, and it's in the documents that you have signed, the cost sharing agreement, I think actually be in the JPA. I'd have to double check. Kevin might be able to correct me on it, but we have a goal to get to 120 days of operating funds available to us. And the way to do that is to build these joint reserves up. So once we get them to a certain amount, 120 days, we're gonna cut that off. We could go to 180 days, but the target is 120. 120 days is definitely significant capital in my view, to have.
But then, once you hit that point, Brian, right, then any extra, say, for the city of Portsmouth on a monthly basis would flow into discretionary reserves, right?
If,
At a point, we're still a few years away from that,
Yeah.
but at a point,
well, there's
That can happen.
3 numbers of operating days that we work with. One is 60. So you need to be at 60 in 3 years. We're already at 60. We hit that in a year. Pretty good. We need to be at 120 as a target in 5. And then 180 days to where that's the number Kevin's talking about, is once we hit 180, then everything above that goes to discretionary. But it will still build from 120 to 180. We have not yet offered CPAs the ability to do discretionary reserves. That's why that's 0. That's not because nobody's chosen it. It's because we haven't offered it. We plan to offer that in August. It's something, it's a benefit of CPCNH being a member. And it's something our communities have asked about. I don't know how many takers there are gonna be the first time around. But
That's how we
that's good to
could
go.
build a fund for projects.
Yeah.
I've always heard the joint reserves described as it's to cushion rate shocks. It's to eliminate the need for too much use of credit or cut down on the use of credit, and also to give us the balance sheet strength to borrow. And also to get the coalition fully funded. and up
Right.
and running.
And I think I talked about those last 3 in a different way. I did not talk about the rate shock part. And it does provide that. If you were to not set your rate correctly. So right now, for 6 months, we have to create a revenue requirement. So you have some forecasting that you need to do. Because we're new, we are doing about 100% of our expected needs for energy. But look, we're growing, we've got a lot of towns. We don't have this historical trend of data to look at like the utilities do. So we're really looking at 1 year's worth of information and then extrapolating. And when you do that, you're not always going to be perfect. There is no perfect forecast. So it does help to have a fund, but it's unlikely we will need it for that. We'll be doing our best never to need it. It's there if you need it.
I have a question about joint reserves and discretionary reserves and when that cutoff happens per town. Because clearly if we're talking about CPCNH having joint reserves of 120 days or 180 days and then roll over, and you keep adding new member towns, you're going to constantly push that date out because you're going to have new reserves that you have to build for every new member town. So is it calculated for the whole organization or is it by member town? So say you have enough joint reserves for 120 days for Portsmouth, so or 180 days, and then Portsmouth rolls over into discretionary, or do you have to wait until the whole entity does?
We're looking at it as a whole entity.
Okay.
as our costs go up, our revenue goes up with bringing more towns on. So
Yeah.
it should stay kind of,
Okay.
it should track.
And to the point of, if we can keep our financing costs down, we can also help keep those rates lower or keep them lower than the utility, what the distribution utilities are, the normal default service provider, and actually leave a little bit of room for reserve. And you probably had that conversation here when we were launching. Any other questions about this? Again, it's a work in progress.
Totally different question, but this goes to the various levels of energy or clean energy that's there. My understanding was Granite Basic is basically parallel to what Eversource provides, correct? And then the others are additional amounts of renewable energy added on top of that. And when I checked, I thought that the plus and the 50 were both below Eversource's rates. Is that correct?
I actually had that slide in here. The 50 was.
Okay, and
Now-
and the plus is lower than that, so that probably is as well.
Yes.
Just the clear.
The
Okay.
100 was not.
No.
Right.
Small premium.
So, from my position on the sustainability committee, I look at that and I go, oh man, we are totally failing as far as communicating the importance of clean energy. If 98% of Portsmouth is just staying at basic and not upgrading at all, we're kind of missing our target. So that to me says two things. One is, how can we communicate better wanting to upgrade to a higher renewable part? And also, maybe is it possible that the default is say Granite Plus, it's still lower than Eversource, but it's better than Eversource as far as that clean energy mix?
Yeah.
So can you speak to that at all?
I can, so to the latter part, you have that choice, there's two offerings that you can change each time we go and change our rates, so. You could take Granite Basic or you could take Granite Plus, those are the two defaults. And you can see there's 3 towns here that have decided to have Granite Plus
Oh,
be their default. So they are, most of the folks that are in there are on Granite Plus, and then you'll see these numbers show that you can always have, for those folks that want to
Opt
keep their
out.
costs down as low as they can opt down
Yep.
to the Granite Basic. So that opportunity, if a city or community was to move forward with that, messaging that part, I think is very important, because there are folks that will want to try to get their costs down as much as possible.
Just let me add to that because I think it's a very good comment. But I think when you look at this number right now, I remember asking Eversource a while back, why don't they offer any green option at all? And their message was that there are not enough people interested in it. Okay. Now, so I think we've only been doing this for 6 months right now. And I think when most people get switched over, first of all, it's something new to them. They don't know exactly all the details, but they're willing to try. And they get automatically switched to it. And if they don't like it, they can opt out. And we see they don't opt out much. I think they need to get comfortable with this whole program first before you can ask them to do more. But I think that is the next level that we're going to be building on to say, okay, Portsmouth, we're at 1%. Let's have a target this year. We're going up to 5% or whatever, and perhaps the city can give some incentive to do that. In fact, we give incentives for people to save water, provide them with water saving devices. We could provide them with energy saving devices, or we can say, if you opt in because, and I think what's missing here too, and maybe Brian was going to talk about this, is no assessment of the impact on greenhouse gases. So do we have a budget of greenhouse gas emissions and we want to reduce that by 10%? And what would it take for how many people to opt into 30 or 50% green? So I think that's the next level to go to, but I think we can't really criticize people at this point after 6 months of operating to say, why don't you guys opt into 100% right away? You're going to show your green credentials. I think people are just a little cautious, They like the idea they're saving money, and they like the idea that they could even save money if they have more green energy. But once they get comfortable with it, I think we can make a stronger appeal to say, well, we want to do this, so you have those options, and we can help you or we can incentivize it. So I think at this point, it's maybe too early to take those people to task because they haven't done it yet.
And just to build on that, historically, when we went live, recall Eversource was at 22.6 for the rate, and astronomically high rate.
Right.
And we went live with a rate of, I think, 15.2 or something like that. So still crazy high rate, but I think at least for going live, part of it was trying to maximize the savings for our citizens, with the opportunity that they could opt up. But when we went live, we went from 22 and change to 15.6 with, I think, we had a lot of debate around this, whether we should go live
Yeah.
with
We did
Granite
debate
Plus
it.
Or Granite Basic.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did debate it and I have the 100% green and I'm happy to do that. But at the time we went live, we didn't know where those opt-up rate levels would fall in August.
Yeah.
We went live in June. We didn't know if we were telling people you're going to save money, make them default Granite Plus or Granite 50, and then find out that they weren't saving money. So I think for public confidence, we wanted to start this way. And we also felt like we're giving you the savings, reinvest some of that in reducing carbon. And that was a better message than we've decided that, you know, what your opt-up will be for you.
The other thing is, there are people who have third-party suppliers, and a lot of them have green power. That was one of the reasons they switched to a third-party supplier.
Sure.
Some of them have contracts that haven't run out yet, and when they do, most likely they're going to switch to our green options here in this program. So
No, I think those are great points, especially what you were just saying there, John, and just looking at how many people have downgraded on the towns that started with Granite Plus, man, that just shows me how valuable that is to just have a higher default, because most people aren't gonna bother to change, and it's a way to kind of force change
Right.
without them even really feeling it much.
Well, several towns chose to make that the default and
Mhm.
And there are other, you can also see, now these are not double digit numbers, but they're higher. So these communities have done something to get people to go to Clean 100. Opt-out campaigns, you've kind of heard of that before. It's difficult to do those. You're not gonna hit 20% with something like that, so never go into that thinking like that. To the point with Eversource said nobody signed up. You might get really good outreach. Communities know how to do it better than the utility. Right, so you might get really good response there, but 3.3% in Hanover went to Clean 100.
Mhm.
Awesome. It's really impressive.
yeah, and I think the trick is to show people, you know, you can pay just a little bit more, but save this many
Mhm.
tons of carbon out of your
Yeah.
house every year.
and we pride ourselves as an organization and community power of giving people choices.
Yeah.
So they don't like to be railroaded into something they didn't choose. Okay, so let them choose.
And you're part of a coalition. So
Yep.
you can ask Hanover, you can ask Harrisville, two completely different types of towns,
Mhm.
also 3.1%. So they can share their experiences with you if you're thinking of doing something. The next slide I had talked, is there anything else on that one? A lot of numbers, sorry you had to look at that.
I don't know quite how to ask this, Brian, but I love what I'm hearing. And particularly in your idea of how to go green. I'm so motivated, I'm gonna go green, okay. I'm trying to think, do any of you who deal with energy products? And I'm talking to a grandparent. And I'm saying, they'd say, I want to help the future. What can I do? Do you have any metaphors about what going 100% green would do as opposed to just the Eversources? Anybody have a good way to language that? You were talking, John, about percentage. I'm just thinking, how would I language that? And because in my mind, is it a big deal? Do I get on the car? Do I do this? Do I go vegan? We're trying to accelerate and scale at the greatest way. How big a deal is this? Is there a way, does anybody have good language for that?
I don't, that's not my cup of tea, not a marketer. And I don't want to, I don't say that flippantly. I don't have a good answer for that. Because if you think about, I think about the movement for energy efficiency. We have been trying to get energy efficiency. It's just the best way, right, to help reduce carbon. And it's always a struggle, and we've been working on it for 3 decades. There's a lot of there's a lot of great, I mean, we have New Hampshire Saves, I mean, we are making a difference there. But when I think about that question, my head goes straight to energy efficiency. What can we learn from those folks on how to talk about the benefit of carbon-free energy?
Bert, you may remember we had a problem here in New Hampshire and other places with sulfur dioxide emissions for killing acid rain, basically. And the federal government had instituted a program of sulfur dioxide allowances that were being traded on the Chicago Board of Trade at a certain price. And what people were doing, environmental groups, they were buying these allowances and retiring them by not letting them be used. So who knows, maybe we could create some kind of greenhouse gas emission reduction certificate that people can gift to other people to say, you know, you just helped reduce greenhouse gas emissions by, I don't know, so many tons or whatever it is, you know? But, you know, basically you were buying sulfur dioxide allowances. It's not a fungible thing, but people got on board to do that.
I think you have an expert on I'm sure Ben could tell you about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
Reggie, yeah.
By those grants.
Yeah,
So
that's the way it's going.
there's a lot of different opportunities, and I think expressing it in carbon too makes a lot of sense for people. I don't know that there's a silver bullet to that question, but
I think if in the climate action plan, we say if Granite Plus was the default rate, the city would save this many tons of carbon every year.
Mhm.
And that became a policy debate and was vigorously debated. It might be something that wins the day. But we didn't want to do it to start out.
I know that the city, what Hanover has done is they have a target to be carbon neutral by a certain date. And in order to do that, you need a strategy to hit that date. Going with community power and hitting Granite Plus is part of that strategy that the town has signed off on. Right, so that's one aspect.
Portsmouth also has an app called Bright Action, and you can get to it from the city website, the Planning and Sustainability Department. And we've promoted clean 100% energy and trying to get people to move up if they didn't initially. That's one of the actions people can take and one that we promote.
And I think as we get a track record that Granite Plus is always lower than Eversource consistently. You know, maybe that's the Goldilocks bowl in the middle. That's a little more green and still saving money.
Mhm.
There we go, we got
Yep.
work cut out for us. Thanks, John.
Both Daphne and Bert's point, as far as the messaging thing, I could see it being really valuable to have like I don't know, average kilowatt hours per household number, right? And being able to take that and like, okay, this is what it is at Granite Basic, this is what it is at near 100 or whatever. And being able to look at that carbon and then message on that, like if you opted to this, here's how much you're contributing to the benefit of, you know, a tangible number, like this is your average household, this is what it would be. And that maybe put into cars off the road or whatever it is, something that's easy.
Counselor.
I just was gonna say, we have discussed at this committee various ways we can incentivize people to opt up. And we're still, I think, thinking about that. You know, we talked about things like having signs that people could put in their windows or their yards or on their bumper or whatever that says, I opted up, you know, and having a marketing campaign around things like that. So we've discussed those options. The challenge is finding ways to do that without increasing plastics
Right.
in the environment. So it's a balancing act, right? So I think we're still talking about things we can do.
So I had one more slide that we could move to. There's actually two more, but this was I was asked to talk about, well, what are you doing down in Concord? What are you working on? We're working on a lot down there. I think this, to me, is a major part of membership in CPCNH that doesn't get the headlines that the rates are lower and we're putting more renewable energy into the state. But we are also, all of these are working towards helping communities meet their energy goals. The focus here is to make sure that it's easier to bring innovation to the residents. And it's not just the residents of the CPAs. These affect everybody in the state. So it's all of New Hampshire. So net energy metering 3.0, moving on to the next iteration of net energy metering.
But Brian, can I
What should it look like?
stop you there and ask about, what about where are we with the transfer of people who are net metering now and can't get onto community power until that's been resolved?
Yes, so there
'Cause I'm one of those people.
And you're not alone there.
Yeah.
A lot of the folks that put a lot of effort into this organization are in the same boat.
Yep.
But there's also a lot of folks in your community that can't really sign up. And there's three reasons for that, three things that we need in order to do it. And if this isn't clear, then tell me it isn't, because we need to get the messaging right on this, because it's hard. It's hard to explain because it's about billing structures, right? So the first one is there's a technical reason why we can't get the data that we need in order to credit somebody. Every time there's an export coming out of the meter, your net meter, it looks like a 0 to us. So physically, the data that comes in can't go negative. They can't change the channel. Most meters have different channels. They have different channels to them, right? For whatever reason, the billing system that can't export that data to us. So we just see it as 0. So every time there's an export, we have no idea how much went into the grid. So there's no way to compensate for that.
But Brian, I mean, on my bill.
Yeah.
There's a category that says sales and category purchases.
Yeah.
And that's related to my meter, which goes in different directions. The one I'm getting in to my home, the purchases, and the one that's going out, sales. So that data is going to Eversource. They know it because they put it on my bill every month.
Yes.
So why can't you get that?
I don't know. But I can tell you that it's not because they don't want to give it to us.
Well, we have what,
Because
59 people in Portsmouth that are doing that? We can give you the data now from our bills.
that could be a
It's not
solution.
0.
We are trying to find solutions, but I wanted to explain what the
Yeah,
reasons
yeah.
are. And
Okay,
the
got it.
main one is we cannot get the information. And it's not because they're withholding it. It's just technically they can't get that data to us through something called EDI, electronic data
Mhm.
interchange. It just doesn't allow you to do it. It's supposed to, but it's not working yet. So that's the first one. The second one is we know that this issue is here. The second one is if we can't get the information, let us know who those net energy metered folks are so we don't enroll them. Because if we enroll them, we won't know because we're enrolling thousands of people at the same time. When a
Mhm.
community comes on, it's not one by one, you check, it's just thousands of people that come on at the same time. If we have a flag that says net energy meeting
Mhm.
person or business, don't enroll, then we won't enroll. It's the same, we get the same type of flag for a
Third party.
someone that's on a third party supplier. So let's treat them the same. So that flag helps us keep those customers out so they don't have a poor experience, because if we don't see that right away, and not every customer looks at their bill every month to look at it and go through it, they may not get their credits and they might not see that for a couple months. And that's not a good experience, and we don't want to be part of that. So that part is the second piece of data that we need. We need to know if you're a net metering customer. The utilities are doing a great job in doing those first two pieces. So we're starting to get the export data. It's not in a timely basis. It's well after the fact, but we could still build a program around that. If you had to wait for your credits for a few months, you're probably gonna be okay. My guess is you'll probably be okay for a little while. And we're starting to get the flags done well. We were getting them before from a volunteer basis. Some were getting missed, but now they've gone through they think they've gone through those wrinkles. The third part is like, there's a second side of a coin. So the first side is, if we know what those credits are, those exports are, then we know how to pay somebody because we know how much it's worth. But those electrons actually do something, right? They go into the distribution system and that energy flows throughout the distribution system. And that energy that is registered on another meter at the edge of the distribution system, which means the meter goes down, right? So if you push energy into it, the meter's not pulling energy coming into it from somewhere else. So that keeps the meter going. Now we look like one of those meters now because we're serving load. And right now, the utilities don't know how to make our meter go down. Their meter can go down when that electricity goes into the system, but ours doesn't. And we're working to make sure that we can take it from their meter, move it over to ours, so it goes down, because that's actually what happened. It's the residents of Portsmouth that are in our meter that exported into our system. So we got the first two. It's the third one. We're really working on this one. EDI working group, data platform, load settlement petition.
And these involves the PUC and the utilities, right?
Yes, and the DOE, Department of Energy. And the utilities, I have a meeting on the 20th, Monday. We're just sitting around a table like this, except it's virtual, right? Nobody gets together, it's all Zoom. And we're talking about this. And they're like, we want to understand this. We're not sure about how to do it. Help us figure that out. That's without the DOE, that's without the PUC, it's just everybody getting together, trying to solve this problem. Because it's a New Hampshire problem, and there's a lot of folks that want a net energy meter in New Hampshire. And it's not just net metering. When you solve net metering, you're now able to bring in other innovation, right? Time of use. You can change your rate over a different hour for the day. And that can send a very strong signal to people to not use energy at this very conflicted time or constrained time, which helps everybody, keeps costs low for everybody. It also, so when we talk about net metering, to me, it's just innovation. If you can't solve the net metering piece, then you're going to not be getting to innovation very quickly.
And for the sustainability folks, just from a number standpoint, we have about 12,500 customers enrolled right now in community power. Another 3,000 or so are with a competitive supplier, and we did enroll. We have 178 that are on net meter. So while it's important to get this fixed, I just don't want to get the impression that we have, several thousand net meter customers that have not been enrolled in community power. It's under 200. Very important to get this fixed, but it's not a huge number for the city.
Did that help with net metering? Because it's complicated.
It is.
But when I try to boil it down, there's 3 things we need, and we're getting 2 of them. So we're getting there. My hope is in 2024, this is behind us.
It's not simple.
Any other questions about some of these? There's more here. I just listed the main ones that we're focused on right now.
But to your point initially, I mean, part of the beauty of community power through the coalition is we as a city have a seat at the table on all these issues with the coalition representing us on a day-to-day basis between Brian and Clifton Below and the new regulatory person coming on board, Dina. It's, we wouldn't have this seat at the table in Concord if we weren't participants in the coalition. Yeah, so.
And you're not just helping Portsmouth, you're helping the whole state.
Just out of curiosity, what's in the rate case?
Liberty distribution rate case. Liberty's trying to do some innovative things, and we want to learn about what those are. So we can either mimic them or if they're getting passed for Liberty, they should be able to be passed for us too, and we can use that as a reference case.
And the complaint,
Overall, the complaint is about the 2200 rules. So the 2200 rules are backing up the law that was passed is RSA 53E. And in order to get 53, that's the legislative side. The regulatory side is the rules that make sure that works, are the 2200 rules we call it. It's just a whole set of rules. The complaint says you're not following the rules. And we want you to follow the rules. And it has a bit to do with net metering, because if the rules say you have to give us this information. And,
So the complaint is not against us, it's against
oh yeah, I should say that.
utilities, right?
Eversource, yeah.
Good point. Was that what your point was, Ben?
I'm just curious,
Well,
and the remedy would be to compel them to do what's in the regulation.
Do what the rules say, do
Yeah.
what the regulations say.
so
So it's our complaint against the utilities. So Harrisville started it. We joined in, and now it's more the CPC&H complaint. It just says, do what the rules say, because they were passed and approved by the PUC. So you go in front of the PUC and say they're not doing the rules. They're like, well, we passed the rules, so why aren't you doing the rules? So it's a good discussion to have. And then I think I had one last slide. I might have gone a little bit over, John, sorry. No, it's okay. And we don't really need to talk about this actually, but when I think about CPC&H, to me, these are what differentiate us from what else is out there. Is we don't just do competitive rates and expanded choices. We work with municipalities, utilities, and state agencies, get energy plans moving forward. We are highly focused on public advocacy, which we just talked about. And we are helping to bring stability to communities by developing financial reserves and a way to build discretionary reserves. So we're not just low rates.
You comment on, we're getting close to rate setting for the winter time, just to remind folks how that kind of plays out.
Yes, we will know the rates. Because there were some other things on the agenda that I didn't touch on. We'll know the rates in December. Can't really give you directionally where they're going. We try to set our rates right after we know what the utility rates are, because one of the main goals here is to try to be lower than the utilities rates, and it's hard to do that when you don't know what they are. It's really the only reason. If we knew what they were, if we knew for sure we were going to be lower, we could set them now. But we want to try to make it so that's an easy for members of a community to just see the savings over the same period. So we have the same rate periods as all the utilities. So we will be setting that rate, unfortunately, around Christmas. So there's going to be some meetings.
In effective February 1.
It'll start on February 1, right? Yeah, so the rate period is February is when one starts and the other one starts in August.
Brian, my understanding is that CPC but basically ladders its purchases of the power over during the 6-month period, while the main utilities do it every 6 months. So from this laddering purchase process, do you have any idea what the energy costs are, or are they trending up or down, or what?
So we can ladder, we don't always ladder. One of the reasons for that is we are tied, for better or for worse, to where the utility rates are right now. So if we were to pull in too much energy at a cost that's different than where the utilities are, it makes it a lot harder for us to reduce the rate. When we launched some communities, we bought some additional power And we actually laddered in a little bit more into the next rate period, actually next 2 rate periods, but it was very little. One way to think about that is we do not have that restriction. So we can go ahead and ladder in power. We are reserving that to bring in longer term kind of power purchase agreements for like a solar farm, right? Or something that needs 20 years or 15 years worth of commitment to support. So then we can ladder in those resources without doing 30% of the portfolio or 40% of the portfolio. So there's a lot of different strategies. At the moment, though, we are purchasing a lot of the power that we need in December for the next rate period, which is February through June. You had another question to that, but I don't know if I.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, other questions for Brian? My big question is, how would it be possible for the coalition as this large purchaser to buy renewables and pass those savings on to our customers as well as the carbon benefits? In other words, can the coalition provide a market for solar projects which benefits us as communities and benefits the state?
We definitely can. And I can tell you, if we go back one slide, actually. This one, load settlement petition. One of the best ways for us to make renewable resources more than cost competitive, so that their lowest cost option is to make sure that we have a way to unlock the full value stack of the energy that those projects are bringing. Right now, we are only able to do the default service part, or the energy and capacity, the things that are flowing through the lines that you need. But there are other costs that are spread throughout New Hampshire, such as transmission costs. If we can get to that value, it makes renewable energy projects and storage particularly extremely valuable, which makes it easier for us to inject a lot of that into our portfolio. So that's one way, is for us to make sure that the amount of value that a project brings to the grid completely can help go to those that are bringing it to the grid. Right now, that's not the case. They're separated. You can bring the project to the grid, but you still can't get the value you're helping create over here. So we want to join those two together. That's the bringing transmission benefit to these renewable projects. So the state can help us with that. And then on the other part, who's heard of Solarize before? Solarize a community. In those types of programs, there's a lot of good examples around the state of New Hampshire called Solarize. So like Solarize Hanover as well. In that, there was an effort in that community to go out and say, who's interested in solar? And then a whole bunch of people put their hands up, but they don't want to deal with getting the suppliers coming in. They don't want to deal with how do you hook it up? What's the technical reason needs and all that? So you pull a whole bunch of people together, and then you have developers come in and just kind of present themselves to say, hey, I can go into this town and I'll be working for the next 6 months because I'm going to be putting solar on the roof of 20 different homes, 30 different homes, who knows what it might be. And because of that, we'll give you a great deal. So there's opportunities like that as well. That's a very local type opportunity. And we are big enough now too that we can support larger renewable facilities and not just benefit Portsmouth. We can spread that energy throughout the state.
Brian, in light of the fact that right now all the focus is on electricity, because that's what the whole program is all about. electricity use is maybe only 30% of energy use for most people. So it seems to me there would be no reason or no impediment for the Community Power Coalition to envision providing some type of energy benefit on other fronts, including heating, including transportation. The regulations basically allow us to do electricity stuff, but heating oil is not a regulated entity. And neither is transportation in that sense. So looking forward, as far as greenhouse gas impacts and so forth, electricity is not even the majority of that. So is there some thinking going on? What could we do in the future to address other energy issues?
Well, you're a member of the coalition, so you can ask those questions of the coalition to do exactly that. But I can tell you that there was one of those question marks up there for a new person. You could actually change the title to Director of Programs and Projects. There is no reason why you can't take the Portsmouth Community Power couldn't decide to do discretionary reserves on their own and throw those reserves into a weatherization or throw it into an EV charging program or something, or increase the amount of efficiency for a particular low to moderate income. It's really to your discretion to what you want to use those for. Pushing the organization to do something like that. That's why you get on the board of directors and help us with strategy to see where do we want to take CPC&H.
All right, other last questions? I think Brian's given us plenty of his time and expertise.
Sorry to bother you one more time, but has any thought been given? I don't know how the rules are, but you probably are aware that churches currently have to pay demand charge, which residents don't. If there is and I presume churches have been switched over to Portsmouth Community Power like every other residence, or not?
If they're not with a supplier, yes.
They should.
Yeah, if they're not with a supplier. But that demand charge on their bill, is there any way for the coalition to address that demand? Because I think it's pretty much phony that churches pay demand charge, because the idea is, we need the capacity to handle everybody, but churches don't operate every day. It's ridiculous for them to be charged. But that's a big, in some churches, that's a big chunk of the bill.
Yeah.
Just a one-time 15-minute spike where they used a lot one Sunday. And for that, they are charged, sometimes half of what they're charged for usage.
Yeah.
So I think I just wonder if that has come up at all in discussion in how the demand charge works when they get switched over.
So we are the supply rate.
I know.
The
Yeah.
demand charge will be on the distribution rate,
Okay.
which is the
It's the
utility,
utility.
making sure that they can afford keeping the poles and wires healthy.
Right. That's
For
the
the
plan.
community.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's,
Okay.
it's a different
Different. Yeah. I get it.
different rate
I get it.
structure.
Mhm.
But I can tell you, if you start to send my hope is that when you start to send the right price signals on all elements of the electric bill, then those types of rate structures don't need to exist any longer, because the reason is you take those costs, those high cost hour, and put it in an hour that is the issue.
Right.
And when you do that, then the church can try to avoid that hour to reduce those costs. Right now, the church will have to have an energy management program for an entire month, not a day, not an hour a day, a whole month, in order to try to miss that 15-minute period. Very difficult to do. You can do it, but it's harder. If you start to move towards that innovation that we're talking about, then people will do it on their own, because that value now is going through the whole bill.
Well, this has been great. I think this is Portsmouth Community Power, I think, has been a success for our citizens. And I think it's been a very exciting startup to be part of. All startups are exciting. Successful startups are really exciting. Having been through one startup that wasn't successful in my career. We just think you guys are doing a terrific job. And
Well, and you guys should be giving yourselves the applause for that because we are made up of you. And that's, look what you've done for your community. It's right there on paper.
And
It's
thank goodness we have Kevin
gonna continue.
taking care of us.
yeah,
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me down. Thank you, Brian. I know you've got other work to do. So sorry, I went a little long.
not that much. So I'm gonna say that concludes our evening's entertainment, but we could keep digging into this a lot longer and it would be fascinating. But I did want to cover a couple of things. At our last meeting, we talked about the future of the Energy Advisory Committee. And we felt that the city needs an energy committee. And particularly needs the expertise of Kevin, of Ben, of Tom and Peter, who are knowledgeable in this field. And we want to, I think there's a program of work for us ahead. Analyzing what the city can do about solar options and local energy projects. Because we're in the middle of an energy transformation. And we want to be as a city on the leading edge of that, which means finding opportunities in that transformation. All of the work that Kevin described happening in Concord is to free up our energy infrastructure for more innovation. And I think there's a role for us as a committee to be constantly studying that and finding those opportunities where we can. And as we talked about tonight, where can we find that balance of reducing carbon footprint and benefiting our residents in what they pay? If we can find that magic combination all the time, I think that just is a great public service to the city. And this committee has, Peter Britz and others would tell you, really good minds who know a lot about energy, electricity in particular, but energy in general. Tom knows a lot about making buildings energy efficient. So I think that's our role going forward. And based on that discussion, I thought we should discuss as a group, having us reappointed by the mayor for the next 2-year term to continue the work. And I think our first work in January would be to really talk about our scope of work and our goals we want to create and our mission. So I would put that to you for discussion.
I mean, I don't think just from even the things we heard tonight from Brian, there's no lack of kind of future opportunities.
Yeah,
right,
you
for
can
the
see all
city.
the pathways starting
All
to
the things to have discussion around and start put plans around and so forth. So I think it makes sense.
right.
I think it makes a lot of sense to continue, but I do think that it would be valuable to see if we can get a member of the Sustainability Committee who's willing to serve on this committee as well. So that we have a little bit of that crossover, because right now I'm the only person doing that. And in the new year, there will only be one city councilor on sustainability. And I'm guessing that's not me. So I think we were going to need a second person to do that, somebody else.
Okay.
Who sits on both.
And we have openings.
Yes,
'Cause
Exactly.
not only Allison's left, but Becca O'Brien,
yes.
2 openings. I agree with that.
So John, I wasn't here at the last meeting. I was traveling abroad at the time. But I read the minutes and you guys did a lot of interesting things. Among other things, the discussion of whether this kind of committee should not be a blue ribbon committee, but a permanent committee.
Right.
And it seems to me, at least in my eyes, it makes a lot of sense to have a permanent energy advisory committee instead of just a blue ribbon committee. Because this is an issue that's not going to go away or anytime soon. In fact, it's only going to grow and become more interesting and complicated maybe in the future. And just as an example of what I think the committee might be more involved in if we wanted to, is I was just at Spinnaker Point recently and they were having some issues with the gym, the lighting fixtures in the gym. Some lights had burned out and somebody was telling me that they were going to be replaced. Well, they were replaced, but they were not replaced with upgraded energy efficiency products because those were more expensive than the traditional ones they had. And so apparently they put in the lowest cost, whatever they could get to replace them, which makes a lot of sense financially, but doesn't make a lot of sense energy-wise. And it doesn't make any sense, if I'm not mistaken, if they had inquired with New Hampshire Saves or had some kind of audit done about what's the best way of doing this, they probably would have discovered that they could get all kinds of rebates and credits for the products and they would be longer lasting. And so it wouldn't be necessarily more costly, but they would have to go through some kind of process. So what I'm thinking is maybe if on a volunteer basis, perhaps when Public Works or the city engineers, when they make any changes that have to do with energy consumption or energy use or whatever, maybe it would be a good idea to pass it through this committee just to get advice, okay, before they go ahead and do it. Because I don't think that was a good thing to do at the time what they did. I don't have the details, but I'm sure that they could have found a better way. Now it takes time and you have to have a process lined up that you do this regularly. And incidentally, from an aesthetic point of view, and I look at this too, because I worked 34 years in lighting, so I notice it right away. If you go into the lobby of the Spinnaker Point and you look on the ceiling, you will discover that there's a set of lights, maybe 4 or 5 of them, that have 4,000 Kelvin temperature, which is bluish. And over here, where the guy is sitting at the desk, he has the warm white lights there. Now, a lot of people don't think of doing that. They just go out and get the same type of light. They put it in. Lo and behold, one has cold temperature, the other one has warm temperature. Cold temperature you need when you're in a morgue and you want to see the body. If you're alive, you want to see a nicer color skin, you get the warm white. But that too is not being considered. That's an aesthetic, but it's important because this is a facility that the city uses, and we want it to make it attractive and nice looking. And all it would take is to get the other brand, not the other brand, but the other type in the same model of bulb that is the warm white versus the cold white. But there's no place for somebody to go and get advice for that. They just say, okay, the bulbs are burned out. Let's go get some new ones. We put them in. Okay, yeah, they're bluish, but hey.
So you would like this committee to review some of the energy choices?
Yeah, I would like the city to if they're going to make any kind of energy decisions like this, including light bulbs, especially with the gym, because it's way up there. I think if they could just pass on to us projects they're looking at and ask if we have any advice to give them as far as what's the best way environmentally, price-wise, energy efficiency-wise, even greenhouse gas reduction-wise, what they should do with it before they go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I think that's the discussion of scope that we need to have. I was going to research energy committees around the state that the various cities have and sort of make a grid of what the responsibilities are that vary, what are the most common responsibilities down to the least. If we can get a sense for what the scope of work is for a typical energy committee, but you know, it can be assisting the city. To me, it can do a lot. We need to do a lot with renewables and what's our future as a city with renewables. We have our CPCNH component. You know, the good news about being a permanent committee, which you mentioned, is that the governance committee will continue on. So anytime we've defined our mission and scope, we can then decide to make that move. And be an ordinance and take 3 readings and go through the council.
Well, just as a follow-up to the Spinnaker Point facility particularly, which I've been speaking about a lot, that facility is a mess when it comes to heating and cooling. Okay, you can go into 3 different rooms and you'll have 10-degree differences in each room. The track there is in the wintertime too cold to not walk on with a winter jacket. And in the summer you sweat because the air conditioning doesn't work. That's a good example of a whole bunch of energy waste going on there. It's both from the gas utility and the electric utility. Both of them have free audit available to us. Even though we don't own the building, we could still do it. And both of them have their own rebate program separately that they can provide us if we decide to do any kind of improvements. But somebody has to be in charge of that, or somebody has to take responsibility for looking into it. And it seems to me that's an example, even though we don't own the building, we still have, I think, a 7-year lease on it. We have to repair it every time something breaks. So it's worth looking into long term.
Yeah, sure. And you know, it's like some people buy a house that is full of problems. Well, Spinnaker's full of problems. I think my thought was tonight that if we could ratify the idea that we want to renew ourselves as a blue ribbon committee and then get to work in January or December on scope of work and so.
Yeah.
So I put a sample motion in the packet saying the Energy Advisory Committee recommends to the mayor reappointment. And we would amend that to say, including members of the Sustainability Committee. At least one, maybe
Okay.
2.
Okay.
So a motion like that.
I'll make a motion like that. Do I need to repeat it?
I think I have it.
All right.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks. So now I'll tell the mayor. And then lastly, on the agenda, I had a number of us went to the Clean Energy New Hampshire Conference. Effie, I think you were there. And Kate. The 2 things that came out to me were there was a nice session on community power with representatives from New York, California via Zoom, the Cape Cod Compact. And I was surprised at how many are still the broker model. And I was pleased that we, through the coalition and using the portfolio approach, are generally getting a more sophisticated aggregation than most of the brokers. So long term, you know, it ratified our decision to go this way. The second thing that I thought was really exciting was aggregations in New York they have what's called default solar. And on your bill, you're given solar as a default, and it saves you 10% on your total energy bill, like that. And you can opt out if you want, but as the guy said, why would anyone want to opt out? So Brian Calnan was at that session as well. We talked about it afterwards. As you can see, none of this is simple. There's obviously a long and complicated process that those aggregations went through to get that. But it was interesting to me seeing these mature community power aggregations now 10 years old, so forth, that are able to do that. So those were my takeaways. I don't know, others that we've had.
Well, I was trying to get my mind around the idea of community solar. And which a lot of people mentioned, and trying to figure out technically how you would do this. Got me thinking about you, Tom, with like the microgrid concept. But it seemed like people were able to, and I know I saw this also in Scotland. I heard there were like communities on the shore of Scotland who they were selling like $100 certificates to fund a wind turbine off the coast. So I'm not sure exactly how the community solar works, but I'm going to try to find out more about it, because that might be a way of being able to participate in something like that individually.
Right.
And also it could be a project that then could be integrated somehow in our own energy use if it's there. So
I think that was the benefit to me of going to a conference like this and hearing what these mature community power aggregations are doing. And it opens up all those avenues. What is community solar? How does it work? How do we get some of those benefits for our residents?
last I checked, when I was still in the legislature, we do have something kind of like when somebody hosts a project, if there's a solar collector field or installation, they could offer to be a host. And then where they would have partners that would be participating in that power. And then they'd have to arrange payments between each other. It sounded really complicated and convoluted. And then, but the host would be always responsible if anything went wrong. So New Hampshire has all kinds of quirky laws that they jigged up like some kind of Rube Goldberg kind of device because they want to do it, but they don't want to do it like other people do it simply. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah. And one of the things Brian will tell you when he's bringing on this director of projects is that CPC&H wants to consult with communities that are looking into any of these things. So we don't feel we're going it alone, or trying to make the right decision.
Right.
That there's a level of expertise at CPC&H that's free to us, right, to consult with around these initiatives to make sure that we're on the right path.
Mhm.
He just reiterated that the other day. He said, I would.
Yeah, and it reinforces, when we first started working with CPC&H before it had a CEO, but when it was just all volunteer effort. The town manager in Hanover was saying, you have to have collaboration to do this, a lot of this stuff. They wanted to hit aggressive carbon goals. They tried to do their own community power aggregation, and they found out how hard it is. And I think the same thing will be true of these alternative energy projects and how it's purchased and how it's financed and where it's located and all of that. And will it be regional or will it be town by town? I think all that's going to play out, but to have a party, the Joint Power Coalition, with its clout and an expertise and ability to be a market maker, I think that's exciting. But it's going to take a long time. And well, we've been going 90 minutes and it's very dense stuff.
Mhm.
Any other items for the good of the discussion? once again, Effie.
I just wanted to thank the counselors that were here. There was a motion on Monday to look at our zoning laws in Portsmouth regarding large scale private solar development and looking at our districting for zoning so that people could come in and build solar arrays. So I was really encouraged by that. Just wanted to appreciate that one.
Yep. Counselor Denton. That was his work.
Can I just, because you just remind me of something my wife has said a couple of times and always in the back of our minds, is some towns and cities have instituted solar ordinances that prohibit anybody from blocking your access to sun. So let's say if you put solar collectors on your roof and your neighbor next door builds another level and puts shade on your solar collectors, that should be prohibited. Because now they're taking away that value that you installed on your home. And in fact, I think in Boston, on the public gardens, they've created some kind of a zoning that says buildings surrounding it cannot throw shadow and shade onto that area because people are enjoying the outdoors and the sunshine. But that applies to solar energy too. If it's on rooftops, you put it in once and your neighbor can block it. So some towns have said, no, we're not giving you any permits to block anybody's solar arrays. And that variance will not be available to you. And the people affected would have to be notified that this building will take away your sunshine, which is money and also renewable energy.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I know at the last meeting, you all heard from Revision Energy about municipal solar. And I just wanted to mention, through another member of the Sustainability Committee, I heard that Chris Rose, who's a science teacher at the Portsmouth Middle School, is applying to the Clipper Foundation for 5 solar panels. And he's been really working hard with his students on building understanding about what solar takes and how it could contribute to their energy needs would be the idea of these 5 solar panels. So I thought it was worth you all knowing about that if you didn't hear it yet.
Would that be on the middle school?
I believe so.
Cool.
Hmm.
Behind the meter. Like in the sense that,
Yeah.
I would assume. That saves the city money. That's a good deal. Any other items for the good of the committee? Not? Thanks, everybody. It's been an interesting evening.
Mhm.
And we'll set dates for one meeting in December and then start it up again in January.
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We need a motion